Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm Steve Hunter. I head up the Transport for Warrington service at Warrington Borough Council, and a very warm welcome here to Carden Park. So, Ben asked me a couple of months ago if I'd come and speak at the conference today, and to very much give a local transport authority perspective. You know, we've talked an awful lot there about partnership working between Warrington's own buses and other bus operators and the council. And what I just want to do, following on from Cathy and Stephen, is just go into a bit more detail about how we're looking to make things better by electric bus in Warrington. So there's various subject matters that I will go through there about what we've done already. And then before I finish, I'll also take a look forward. We've got a bus service improvement plan to submit by this June, and what are we looking at in the future in partnership with Warrington's own buses. So Stephen's just referred to that into just some brief background and context in Warrington. Just over 200,000 population, sandwiched between Liverpool and Manchester, and we are very well located, very well connected, very prosperous economically, but as Stephen's just referred to, that does bring a downside in terms of car dependency, in terms of traffic congestion, and there are certainly challenges that I have to face on a daily basis in terms of balancing the needs of all the different types of transport, and obviously predominantly today talking about the bus service situation. So that's not a good graph. You don't need to read the dates on it. I'll go through the dates. We had an unenviable record of losing more bus passengers than any other local authority in England between 2011 and 2016. And if you'll pardon the pun, we needed to move on up. And obviously, I'm sure it's no coincidence that Ben started in 2017, and that's really the start of this journey that we needed to go in Warrington, because there was very much a vicious circle in place in those years. There were fare increases, service cuts, fare increases, and it got into a vicious circle situation, and we had to turn things around. That was a real challenge for us, and things had stabilised, things had just started to go up again when the pandemic struck in early 2020. And obviously what we've had to do now is adapt to the post-pandemic situation and to look to recover as we've gone forward, and as the government support's come in for part of that time and then it's gone away again. So how have we adapted to that post-COVID situation to drive those bus passenger numbers up across Warrington? So just very briefly, absolutely critical that we have that policy context. And Cathy and Stephen have already touched on this. Buses are an absolutely critical part of our local transport plan. Our last local transport plan was adopted in December 2019. And the vision statement is very clear on public transport networks supporting our carbon neutral future. And that's something that as a council we've declared a climate emergency. That's something that is a huge priority for us as a council, is delivering that modal shift to walking, cycling and public transport, but delivering the benefits of carbon reduction as well, which is a critical part of that. So we're in a situation at the moment where we're implementing LTP4. We're waiting for the revised guidance that will come through, I think, after the general election now from the DFT. That will have even more emphasis on carbon reduction than the current guidance, so it only emphasises the need for us to be better by electric bus in Warrington. And within that local transport plan, we've set a very ambitious target. The graph, circle on the left there, is journey to work data. We've got 74% of people travelling to work by car. That's probably a good 5 or 6% above the national average. When we had the 2011 census, quite a low share of bus use there, just under 6%. And we've set a target by the 2041 census. We want to treble the share of buses, we want to treble the share of walking and cycling. And as Stephen and Cathy have alluded to, that does require difficult decisions to be made. And certainly we've over the last few years, we have made those difficult decisions. Stephen's already touched on the investment decisions that the council's had to take, and obviously as officers we're very grateful for the support that we've had from Cathy and her colleagues on the cabinet to drive this forward. So we're looking to reduce the dependency on the car, look to reverse that falling bus patronage, which has been accentuated by the pandemic. look to address congestion issues for buses on strategic corridors, which I'll talk more about later on, and really to get our bus provision and infrastructure up to a really consistent high standard across the piece, and to deliver those aims and objectives within Local Transport Plan 4. So in terms of bringing this more up to date now, April 21, obviously we were coming out of the pandemic at that point. The government published the long-awaited National Bus Strategy for England, Bus Back Better, and charged us all gave us 6 months to write a bus service improvement plan. And obviously the urgency was accentuated by the COVID pandemic, so we duly did that. And then we updated it in October 22, 12 months later. And what I'm going to just take you through now is, with those headings on the right-hand side there, is where we got to in terms of developing that plan and the implementation of that plan going forward. So at the time, we did 6 weeks of consultation during the summer of 2021, just under 250 responses received. Hearteningly, Warrington residents were overwhelmingly in favour of investment in public transport. And the 4 bullet points under the key areas investment, there's not going to be any surprise to any of you in the room. That I'm sure that they're fairly obvious things. I'm sure they're very consistent with what you all find in your bus operations around the country, that yes, people want buses to serve more locations, they want the gaps in the network filled, higher frequencies, especially at the evenings and weekends, and that's something we've focused on quite a lot in Warrington. We all want cheaper and simpler fares, and to take actions to make buses run on time. And, very much the local priorities reflect the national priorities. So it's given us a mandate there in terms of introducing measures. And in that session that Stephen spoke with Dave just, all local transport authorities have got 2 options. They've got a franchise option, which our 2 neighbours in Liverpool and Manchester have chosen, but they've also got an enhanced partnership option. And we've almost got a bit of a hybrid situation with Warrington's own buses operating over 80% of our mileage and services. And we've gone down the enhanced partnership route, where we work very closely with Warrington's own buses, but with the other bus operators that operate the other 20% of the services as well. And, very much work with them in partnership to drive those bus service improvements forward. So in terms of the relationships between the council and Warrington's own buses, people of Warrington are very proud of their bus company. You go back to the 1990s, they were able to see off other operators in terms of the bus wars that occurred during the 1990s, and people of Warrington are very loyal to their local bus company, and certainly it's absolutely vital in my view that we retained that ownership. I think that's a huge plus for ourselves at the council and for the people of Warrington. And we work very collaboratively with Ben and his team on the Zebra proposals, other improvements to bus services, and obviously WOB do a lot of work in the local community as well, and we've got very much shared priorities. So yes, investment decisions are difficult at the moment with where things sit financially, but ultimately Zebra, which I'll talk more about in a moment, is very much the council investing in its bus company, and why wouldn't it, in terms of strengthening that operation. So in terms of the market share, I say it's about just under 85% from Warrington's own buses. We have Arriva at 13%, who offered more of the long distance interurban routes. We've got 1 route coming in from Stagecoach as part of the Greater Manchester franchise, and then a couple of SMEs who provide a vital role there. Relatively limited on-road competition, and an enhanced partnership that we've had in place for a couple of years now that's really starting to flourish, and we have some really good discussions in those meetings with WOB and the other operators. But one thing I would emphasise in terms of the financial base is some figures there that I've reproduced at the bottom. That, to cut a long story short, Manchester and Liverpool have about 4 times the funding per head to spend than we do. We don't have a council tax precept, we don't have a passenger transport executive that was set up a long time ago, so we're working from a difficult base, but we are starting to make some big strides forward in terms of improving bus services in Warrington. So What was very much welcome, we put an awful lot of hard work into the bus service improvement plan, and we were very pleased to get the 9th highest national funding award for our BSIP. We got £16.2 million, which has since been topped up with a further £1.2 million of Network North monies for the financial year that we're in now. And that's being invested in a mixture of cap fares, more bus services, and then just under £10 million for bus priority measures on our main radial corridor into the town. So we're right in the middle of that at the moment, between 23 and 25 in terms of implementing that, and we're starting to see some results as well, which I'll talk more about later. So it's very much a journey that we've gone on from 2022 was really the start of this, where we introduced a super summer service and marketed that very heavily in July 22, and we brought in £2 adult cap fares and £1 child fares post 7 o'clock before the government scheme later brought those in. And we, at the same time, we brought back the pre-COVID frequencies for all of our evening services. And we removed the pre-09:30 restriction on concessionary fares at the same time, and pushed it and marketed it very heavily, and got some really encouraging usage figures across the summer, making use of the summer holidays in terms of making leisure and social journeys across that period. And what we hoped we would do by boosting the evening services is boost the demand in the late afternoon. That if people set out on their journey in the late afternoon, and they want that certainty of being able to get back in the evening, and the figures show it, we have had increases in late afternoon demand that's been driven by the investment in those evening services. So that's where we've been able to make that investment to investment pay off. So that was all in 2022. In 2023, the government introduced the £2 cap fare, so we were then not just able to have that after 7 p.m, that then has rolled forward to all day. And then 6 months later, as part of our BSIP, we introduced £1 cap fares, and that for children, we were able to use some money freed up by the DfT funding the £2 cap fare initially to extend that eligibility to under 19s. And then from the 1st of April this year, we've extended that to under 22s. Really well received, particularly by local colleges and the youth zone that's recently opened in Warrington. And we've also introduced free travel for care leavers as well. And to be honest, that's why I work in the public sector, to do things like that people that haven't had the best start in life, well, let's give them a hand, let's give them some free travel on our bus services. And all of that's in place now. At the moment, we have funding through to March 25. Obviously, none of us know what we're getting after that, but we are pushing this very hard with all the bus operators to drive that patronage growth, and obviously hopefully keep as many of those services going as possible once we get past March 25, and to make as many of those commercial as possible. So that's very much the revenue side of our bus service improvement plan. In terms of physical capital investment, we're looking at the image shown there is an image from a bus priority and mass transit study we did as part of the development of our LTP4, and that identified the top 30 locations across Warrington where buses get held up, through actual data. And we look to identify clusters of places where buses are held up at the moment, cross-checked that with the number of buses and the frequency of the bus services, and identified the A49 Winnick Road corridor coming north-south into the town centre from the north, which is shown in the oval on the plan there, which identified 3 of the top 10 locations were on that corridor. So we're now taking forward bus priority on that corridor. Much as I'd like to treat the whole corridor with bus lanes and bus gates, the £10 million doesn't run to that. So we had a very in-depth look at the corridor, and to make sure that we're targeting an investment at the right locations on that corridor. Where are the buses being held up the most? Where can we get the greatest benefit in terms of reducing bus journey times, reducing the variability of bus journey times, which I'm sure is very important to you all as bus operators within the room, So this will be a mixture of bus lanes. It will maintain general traffic lanes. It will be a new bus gate at the bottom end of the scheme, which I'll talk more about in a moment. And we'll also be bringing in traffic signal priority for all the traffic signals on that corridor to look to identify buses, particularly where buses are running late, and to look where they can to speed those buses up as they progress up and down the corridor in and out of Warrington. So we're at detailed design stage. We did a successful public consultation in late 23, and we're going to be going back to our cabinet in the early autumn to get final approval to deliver the scheme. And there's a couple of images there from the public consultation that we did. The image on the left is at the north end of that corridor. There's a junction there called Northway at the top, where the buses have to make quite a difficult right turn out of the giveway there that you can see that van just looking to emerge out of the junction there. What's going to be involved here is that we're going to put a pedestrian and cycle crossing in there, and that will be valuable anyway. We've got a further education college just across the road. That will be well used, but we will also trigger it when we see a bus on this corridor to get the bus out, and then we'll feed it into a bus lane that takes it round the corner and gets it onto Winnick Road. And then moving further south on the corridor at the south end, Stephen's beloved Halliwell Jones Stadium is just off the plan, the rugby stadium. Cathy and Ben's new depot is just over on the left-hand side, about 400 yards off this plan, and this is the main A49 Winnick Road corridor. And we already have a bus gate coming out here that saves a considerable amount of time, but the scheme is to create a southbound bus lane and to make this bus gate two-way as it comes into the town centre. And we're confident with the modelling that we've done that will consistently save between 2.5 and 2.5 minutes on all bus journeys, particularly during the peak periods. So in terms of Zebra, zero emission buses and the all-electric depot, we're doing it for all the reasons that have already been set out in terms of reducing pollution, emissions, carbon reduction, to drive more people to use the buses, to reduce the operating costs, along with the investment of the depot that my colleague John will talk about shortly, and for that to be consistent with our LTP4, with our bus service improvement plan, climate emergency and bus priority measures. So how have we made this work? Well, this started, we can't power 105 buses without grid capacity, and certainly anyone around the room that's looking to introduce electric buses, that's the first thing you've got to check. You've got to check there's capacity within the grid. We were lucky, we took the last bit of power in that part of Warrington, or this talk wouldn't be happening. So that's the absolute critical advice I'd give to anyone. So we secured the grid capacity. We're going to be converting the entire 105 bus fleet, so that new depot will be fully electric. The council is purchasing the buses, and we're passing them on to Warrington's own buses at nominal cost. And as Stephen set out, this is going to be funded through a mixture of government funding and the council's capital programme. By the end of this year, all 105 buses will be in service, and we're very much looking forward to those coming on stream. The video's touched on this, so I won't spend too long on this slide, but bus travel accounting for 1% of distance travelled, but 11% of nitrogen dioxide emissions. 145 people die prematurely in Warrington every year due to poor air quality. These are very stark figures. This is why we're looking at carbon reduction and to reduce those impacts. And the tonnes saved were already in the video, so I won't go through those again. But that's exemplified by a map here of Warrington, which shows the motorway box that Warrington benefits from. Warrington gets great connectivity across the country from the motorway box that surrounds Warrington, but it's in red because it's an air quality management area in terms of the fumes generated by the vehicles, and then all of the radial routes shown there in and out of Warrington are also within an air quality management area. And that corridor from the north there is the one that we're tackling with bus priority. That's the one that's got Warrington's own buses' busiest route on it, and we really want to drive that patronage growth, that modal shift on that corridor, and to look to improve the air quality for the people that live either side either side of that main route within Warrington. I'll only touch briefly on the depot because John's going to talk about this, but as it said in the video, it was future-proofed. You've got all of the pipe work coming out of the underground there. All the underground services were put in. They were put in at the start of this at risk. The council took that decision to do that at risk before we got the Zebra funding. And then that's just an illustration in the middle at the bottom there of work that's underway to install the chargers to charge the buses once they arrive soon. And a wet July day, we launched the first demonstrator bus last year, and then more recently in March, we had an event within the depot where we launched the new buses. And as already touched on, we, ourselves and Ben and his team thought hard about this. We decided to go for yellow, very much in the northwest of England. If it's yellow, it's a bus. Let's get that identity across the whole of the northwest England, and obviously it's a very striking livery that there is there. So in terms of infrastructure, we've also replaced our bus shelters. We've been through an agreement with the light media. We've replaced them all. What's important here, though, is that in the new agreements, with the old agreement, they got cleaned, they got maintained, and that was it. With the new agreement, we have got a cash payment each year that we'll be able to directly invest in services with the additional advertising revenue that they're able to make through 80 digital displays that they've brought in there. And we get free advertising as well that we're using very heavily for the Better Buy Bus campaign. And there's just a few examples: wind turbines, solar panels. The one at the bottom there is outside our new council offices. It's a big shelter that acts as a taxi shelter as well for people catching a taxi after they've been out in the evening. So very briefly, what's next? I've talked about what we've done in the last few years. I've talked about the improvements that we've generated that has started to bring more passengers in. You're looking at a 10 or 15% increase in passengers in the last 12 to 18 months. We want to bring back real-time passenger information at the stops. We want to build on that in terms of the software, in terms of what people have got on their device as well. Look to bring in e-timetables at the stops. What do we do with multi-operator ticketing? More off-bus sales, tap and cap, bus interchange. Anyone that's seen our bus interchange, it needs investment. And obviously we're hoping the local transport fund monies will be able to spend on that. We will have 80% of our buses zero emission. We want all of them to be. We want to look at the next big corridor for bus priority, which will be the A57, and we want to improve more stops and shelters as we go along. And we're in the middle of writing that plan in consultation and partnership with our operators, which is due in June. So that's everything I want to say. And hand back to yourself, Dave.
Steve, thanks very much indeed.